This is XN Anderson. Welcome to the Principle Podcast today. Today we're talking about the principles. And as you know, I believe the principles that govern everything, you can find them, a lot of them, in ancient scripts, ancient records. Principles have been around a long time. They're like gravity. You can't invent them. They're not the latest fad, the latest book, the latest program. They're really, really old. They're ancient like gravity. And so when I'm looking for principles, when I'm trying to figure out what they are, in my opinion, you can find a lot of them in ancient records. One of the ones that I like to look at is the Bible. Matthew 5-7 has tons. Jesus Christ is talking about principles, I think, that govern everything. One of the things he said, and I'll read this one. He says, "Take heed that you do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise, ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly." Remember, we talked about the rules. The rules give us freedom. If you haven't heard that, listen to the last, I think episodes 21, 22, 23, somewhere in there. These are rules that give us freedom. And if we can learn to do things that are good, but not blast a trumpet in front of us. In other words, maybe we could ask ourselves, am I doing this thing that's good so that others can see me? Am I doing it so that I can be seen? Or am I doing it because it's the right thing to do? In other words, one of them is kind of ego-based. One of them is based on your conscience, which is doing it because it's the right thing or a good thing. And if we can literally try to do as much stuff as we can without doing it to be seen. In other words, if you feel like you should help somebody, maybe keep it a secret. He said, don't even let your left hand know what your right hand does, meaning you can serve people in your own family sometimes, or in your extended family, or people in your neighborhood without ever telling them that it was you who served them. You know, I got to tell you, doing this, I think, really increases your power to influence. And I'll tell you a story. You know, my dad, many years ago when I was just a young boy, told me a story about how there was one Christmas where they were quite tight on cash. And on Christmas Eve, I believe it was, they got a knock on the door. They opened the door, and there was this big red Santa Claus bag filled with gifts. And to this day, decades later, my dad has no idea who left that big Christmas bag full of gifts on a Christmas when they could really use the help. And because of that, he said, I felt like because I didn't know who did it, I knew that it could be almost anybody. And so I wanted to help and be nice to just about everybody because I didn't know if they were the secret donor. If you can do your alms, not to say, hey, look at me, or put it on TV, but just to do something nice like this one person did for my father decades ago when I was just a little boy. He still talks about it to this day. The ability to influence and have a profound effect, I think, will go through the roof. And I know that because the Savior talked about it in Matthew 5-7, it's one of those principles that has a lot of power behind it. This is XN. Thank you for listening to Principle Podcast today. This is XN Anderson. Thank you for joining me on the Principle Podcast today. You know, I wrote a book called What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die that has a lot of my thinking and thoughts about the best principles. For those of you going through painful times right now, remember, with Christ, our greatest pain can become our greatest strength. In fact, our pain, I believe, is just our superpower in embryo. And remember, no matter the question, love is the answer. I love you as much as I can for not having met you in person. Thanks for joining me.